The air in Courtroom 9A was a stagnant, heavy thing, thick with the unsaid and dense with anticipation. It clung to the worn wooden benches and high, dusty windows where the morning light struggled to pierce the overcast sky. The gallery hummed with the low murmur of reporters and the anxious whispers of family, a sound that did little to stir the profound stillness of Alicia Matthews. She sat at the defendant's table, a single mother whose world had shrunk to the space between two armed bailiffs. Accused of resisting arrest and endangering an officer, she felt the prosecution's narrative settle over her like a shroud. They painted her as aggressive, unstable, a danger. They neglected to mention she was a woman trying to shield her 6-year-old son, Jalen, during a traffic stop that had curdled into a nightmare. Her public defender, a man whose suit seemed as weary as his eyes, whispered reassurances that felt hollow and useless. Behind her, Jalen sat small and silent, his fingers clutching the straps of a Spider-Man backpack, his wide eyes fixed on the man in the crisp blue uniform. Opposite them, Officer Darnell Briggs sat with an unnerving confidence. He surveyed the room not as a witness, but as a proprietor, his posture unyielding, his expression a mask of professional detachment. The trial was already a blur of legal jargon and character assassination. Officer after officer had taken the stand, their testimonies a synchronized chorus reinforcing Briggs's account. Alicia had been the aggressor, they said. She had screamed, she had shoved. Yet there was no proof. The body cam footage had mysteriously corrupted. The dash cam video was inexplicably missing. A traffic camera that should have captured everything was conveniently offline for maintenance. Her lawyer's motion to delay the trial for data recovery was swiftly denied by a judge whose impatience was as plain as the heavy bags under his eyes. Hope was a dwindling resource. On the third day, as the judge prepared to call for a recess, a small voice cut through the suffocating tension. "Excuse me," it said, barely a whisper, yet it seized the attention of the entire room. "Can I say something?" Everyone turned. Lawyers froze mid-sentence. The judge, startled from his routine, peered down from the bench. Alicia's head whipped around, her eyes wide with a mixture of fear and love. "Jalen, no," she mouthed, a desperate, silent plea. But her son was already standing, his small frame trembling but resolute. "I want to talk," he repeated, his voice gaining a sliver of strength. "I remember everything." A wave of murmurs swept through the gallery. The judge, his curiosity piqued, motioned to the bailiff. "Bring the boy forward." And just like that, a child was sworn in to tell the truth. Jalen's feet dangled high above the floor as he sat in the cavernous witness chair. He looked impossibly small, his hand dwarfed by the Bible he had just sworn upon. "What do you want to tell us, young man?" the judge asked, his voice softer than it had been all week. Jalen took a deep, shaky breath and looked directly at Officer Briggs. "He's lying." Gasps rippled through the courtroom. The prosecutor shot to his feet. "Objection. Your Honor, he's a minor. He was not on the witness list. This is highly irregular." The judge raised a silencing hand. "We're already here. Let the boy speak." Jalen's eyes never left the officer. He pulled Mommy out of the car. She wasn't yelling, she was crying. He used mean words. He pushed her face on the ground and said she was acting crazy. But she wasn't. I saw it all. The room was utterly still. Jalen swallowed hard, his small throat working. "He saw me," he continued, recording with Mommy's phone. "He took it and told me nobody would believe me anyway." The silence that followed was different. It was heavy with the weight of a terrible possibility. The defense attorney, who had seemed resigned to defeat, was suddenly electrified. He rose slowly. "Jalen," he asked, his voice gentle but clear, "do you remember what he did with your mom's phone?" Jalen nodded. "He crushed it with his boot. Then he threw it in the grass." "And what was on the phone, Jalen?" "A video," the boy said. "Everything. From when he came to the window to when he put Mommy in the car." Officer Briggs sat frozen, a sheen of sweat suddenly beading on his forehead. The prosecutor stared blankly at his legal pad. The defense lawyer turned to the bench. "Your Honor," he announced, his voice ringing with newfound conviction, "I move to subpoena Officer Briggs's personal phone records and request an emergency IT forensic analysis on Ms. Matthews's cloud storage account. This child's testimony suggests the deliberate destruction of exculpatory evidence." The judge, his expression now one of grave concern, nodded slowly. "Granted." The next 72 hours dismantled the prosecution's case piece by piece. Forensic specialists recovered a full video from Alicia's cloud backup, automatically saved moments before her phone was destroyed. The footage was damning and crystal clear. It showed an unarmed Alicia being forcibly pulled from her vehicle, her face slammed into the hot asphalt not in a struggle, but in a brutal assault. It showed Officer Briggs glancing around furtively before spotting the phone on the passenger seat, his boot coming down to stomp it into silence. It showed a mother who had done nothing to provoke such violence. When the video was played in the courtroom, the air crackled with outrage. Reporters scribbled furiously. Alicia wept silently into her hands as Jalen buried his face in her lap. Briggs's face was ashen. Then came the final, unexpected blow. A young officer from Briggs's own precinct, Renee Alvarez, came forward as a whistleblower. She presented a hidden flash drive to the court. "He has a history of this," she stated, her voice shaking but firm. Complaints were buried. Reports were deleted. He was protected. On the drive were years of suppressed internal affairs memos, a shadow ledger of misconduct. The case imploded. Alicia's charges were immediately dropped. But it was no longer just about her freedom. Backed by a newly assembled civil rights team, she filed a sweeping lawsuit for malicious prosecution, assault, and racial profiling. Protesters gathered on the courthouse steps as the story exploded onto the national stage. Officer Briggs was suspended, then arrested. Months later, Alicia stood on a stage at a televised city forum on police reform. The city had enacted new policies, the police chief had resigned, and the judge who had nearly ruined her life had issued a public apology before taking an early retirement. A foundation, Jalen Speaks, had been launched to provide legal aid and protect young witnesses. Jalen, a little taller and no longer so quiet, stood at the podium beside her. He looked out at the crowd, his gaze steady. "I was told I was too small to know the truth," he said, his young voice clear and strong. "But the truth isn't about how big you are. It's about what's right." He stepped down from the podium to a thunderous, standing ovation. He found his mother's hand and together, they watched the seeds of a child's courage begin to take root. In the back of the room, Officer Alvarez, now a community liaison, wiped a tear from her eye and smiled. The echo of a small voice was at last beginning to reshape their world.